Okay, good afternoon, everyone. We've just made a start there now, and then we're going to look at elements 3 and 4. Like I've said already, this is the second webinar in our series of 4, looking at the nitty-gritty of each of the elements and breaking it down so hopefully they're more manageable chunks and that no one feels overwhelmed when tasked or asked to do this in their schools. So the first thing I want to start at, though, maybe as a little jump forward, is just looking at the school's assessment day and what it will entail. What should you expect when your assessor visits the school? Well, the important thing to note is that the school determine when they feel ready to invite IQM into your school. We're not inspectors, we're school improvement partners, and we're assessors. All of our team are trained and have worked in schools, and we all come from a teaching background. Our assessors will receive your paperwork 3 weeks before visiting your school. If your school have got less than 400 students, it will be a 1-day assessment. If you've got 401 or more, it will be a 2-day assessment. They will receive your populated self-evaluation report 3 weeks before visiting your school. And you'll be reminded of when the deadline of when you should be expected to have your paperwork in. But if you had nominated for an assessment date to be June the 27th of this year, you would have expected to have all your paperwork in with IQM 21 days previous on June the 6th. So be mindful of that when you choose your assessment date, that 3 weeks before the paperwork will be due in. It will then be sent to the assessor, and our assessors will be in contact with schools approximately 2 weeks before they visit. And they'll be following from the outset a positive line of inquiry approach. They're trying to catch you in and not out. They will look at your paperwork across the 8 elements, and they'll be looking for themes and processes, and they'll be looking to see how you have pitched your current practices, policies, and pedagogies against our national standards. They'll be looking to see, are there any themes across the 8 elements that show that the culture is very deep in the school and that distributive leadership has been at the core of the gathering and the consultation process in pulling together the self-evaluation report. They will reach out to the school then approximately 2 weeks beforehand. When they then speak to the school, they will ask you to create a timetable for the 2-day itinerary. They will mention to you some of the positive lines of inquiry and some of the key stakeholders that they will want to see and meet with. They will identify at this early stage which initiatives they were very impressed with and people across the 8 elements that they think were inclusion champions or drivers of change that they would like to meet with. And there's a bit of co-design goes on there. From your point of view, make sure you pull our assessor by the nose to everything you want him or her to see. Manage your assessment well. When they visit your school, on the day they arrive, they will arrive promptly and maybe even 15 or so minutes before you expected them. They'll be keen to see and witness the flow of your children and families to school in the morning and visibility of staff at the gates and in the playground. And then when they enter the school building, they'll be looking for that word ethos and trying to feel it. Ethos is the Greek word for character. So instantly, what does it look and feel like when they arrive through the front doors of the school? And can they picture what it would be like for a new member of staff or a new child starting in the school? And thereafter, they will go to, they'll meet with SLT, and they will go to the base room in the school where they will look and host their meetings that day. There might be learning walks and talks, a chance to meet key stakeholders and to look for key evidence and documentation. This will all be pre-designed beforehand, and the school themselves can manage that in conjunction with the assessor. If it's a 2-day assessment, at the end of day 1, you'll receive a bit of verbal feedback and a progress update. And if it's a one-day assessment, at the end of your day, the assessor will give you verbal feedback on his or her findings before going away to write their report. When they write the report, it may take up to 3 weeks for the school to receive their report, and that will be sent to you in due course. I am moving ahead a little bit there to when we talk about the assessor, but I think it's worthy for all schools to have in mind their end game, and we don't want to have drift. So if we're looking through these elements, ultimately you're thinking, well, what message do we want to convey to our assessor? How do we want to make sure they hear the truth? Okay, so looking at element 3, element 3, we're looking at the curriculum and how it is structured for pupil engagement and levels of adoption. Now, as an assessor and as a former head teacher, when I was compiling this or reading this, schools have a lot ongoing in terms of curriculum, and it's often the element that has the most quantity because there's so many aspects of curriculum design and change and intervention that showcase very well the school's inclusive approach. What we have done here is we've looked at the 11 statements, the sub-criteria for element 3, and I've broken it down and maybe lifted either a bossy verb or something that for you to hone in on. So when I'm looking at that, hopefully you can see that screen that goes from 3.1 to 3.11. I have looked at the statements that are on your SER, your self-evaluation report, and lifted maybe 1 or 2 words for you to focus in on. So in 3.1, we're trying to determine the breadth and the sequencing of your school's curriculum. What approaches do you follow? What lines of progression are evident? What is the holistic breadth of your curriculum? And how is it sequenced from point of entry to point of departure for your children? And how do you reflect and evaluate upon your curriculum? But we're very keen there to learn about the breadth that is there for your students and that their interests are well catered for. 3.2, the pivotal place of reading right across the curriculum. How is your curriculum designed that will develop reading skills and will enable your children to develop key vocabulary and indeed inference skills? Is there a joined up approach between your literacy lead and other subject leads to enable and empower this to happen? Do you deploy a thematic approach? 3.3, how do the leaders ensure that the curriculum provides the platform for pupils to develop and build upon their knowledge, skills, and understanding? How do you platform them? Do you involve any key partners in the designing of your curriculum? And how do you make sure children are at the heart of your curriculum? And it's their learning needs that are met. So I think you'll see early on, if you're at one of the schools that's looking about distributing leadership and sharing around the elements for different stakeholders or different staff members to own, that there might be a strong place here for your core curriculum leads and a chance here for your core curriculum leads to maybe build a team of talents around the school to discuss how your curriculum will be more inclusive. 3.4, the design of your curriculum. How is your curriculum designed to meet and address local needs, national, and the international dimension? So how are your children being prepared for tomorrow's world and the world around them? How does your curriculum allow for the children to know their place and feel secure in their place in the school and the context that surrounds them? 3.5, the character building and self-esteem building of your curriculum. How is it designed to inspire and motivate your pupils to develop their character and to succeed in the modern world? So how is it challenging, progressive, ambitious? It builds self-esteem. and it motivates your children. 3.6, how have you in recent times developed a curriculum that offers opportunities for learning beyond the classroom? Do your children have the opportunity to video conference or engage with other children, other schools, personalities? I think since COVID, this has definitely been an eye-opener, and we're very watchful and mindful about who out there can add and enhance our curriculum. So what opportunities of note have your children had to avail of these learning opportunities beyond the classroom? 3.7, how does the wider curriculum in your school develop the basic skills of reading, writing, and maths? And again, looking at that idea of cross-curricular linkage, where maybe you've had mathematics theme days, where you've used creative thinking to inspire and instill different ways of opening up subject and curriculum areas so that new children can find a love for the area. 3.8, risk-taking. How is your curriculum offered opportunities for staff and your learners to take risks and challenge themselves? Right across this SCR, we like to see a school that has developed a growth mindset, where they have challenged themselves, they've looked at themselves, they've taken self-evaluation, they've looked at opportunities on offer, and they've wanted to be at the forefront, the cutting edge. So where has your curriculum offered opportunities for risk-taking? Again, I'll emphasize both at pupil level and staff level. 3.9, I've dropped it in already, the idea of a thematic approach. Is your curriculum delivered using this thematic approach? And if so, how does it enable pupils to acquire knowledge, skills, and understanding across subject areas? And if you don't, how still are you enabling your students to acquire skills and understanding across subject areas? 3.10, across the year, you'll have a number of staff meetings and opportunities to review curriculum teams, to review teaching and learning. So how can staff come together? How do they come together? How are they organised to come together to create professional dialogue? That means they can discuss the curriculum and approach it and look for alternative ways in a coherent and succinct manner. And are they encouraged to do so? 3.11, your extracurricular activities. How widely are they promoted across the school? And do you monitor take-up and levels of pupil interest from term to term? So in that element 3, paint a deep picture of the curriculum across your school. It's one of the elements that so many different people own. Like I've said at the start, quantity usually is not a problem in this one. So I think where you want to get that edge is how you make sure your school does not have initiative-itis, and you just do not keep expanding your curriculum ever more. That indeed actually you're a reflective school, that where you see better opportunities and room for enhancement, you're prepared to make the changes and disregard previous types of learning that are no longer fit for purpose, that you're not just growing your curriculum, you're actually developing it, and you're being progressive about that. Because if you get that, you're very mindful of workload and you're being much more on point. And that's you absolutely knowing the needs, the inclusive needs of all your students. So at that, I'll take any questions there may be about element 3. There's a question there, sorry, 1 second. How should the curriculum coordinators and support staff of the school be involved in the development and review of the IQM process? There's a fantastic opportunity, and you would miss a trick as a school here if you don't decide to use your curriculum teams with a wide section of school life coming together to contribute to this, where you can mix people of different levels of experience and for them to start talking about inclusion within their own remit. You want people to identify that they own inclusion just as much as the safeguarding team do. So how does your classroom become more inclusive? How does your curriculum area become more inclusive? How do you share and make good inclusive practice more explicit across the school? It's when you bring and create opportunities for staff to come together to talk about it. Otherwise, you will remain with some people doing the heavy lifting. Yeah. And okay, I think at that I will move it on to element 4. Okay, so element 4, we're looking at the teaching and learning, the learning environment, and the planning resources and your pedagogy. So 4.1, the key word there is challenge. How is your school set up to provide challenge at individual and group level as well as whole class? So it's quite often the case that our assessors will do a learning walk or may observe some teaching and learning when they visit the school. It's a great place for you to showcase everything you're saying is happening across the school. But to be truly inclusive, we're meeting the needs of all our learners. And with that comes the challenge. So the thought and the planning processes that have gone in to ensure that challenge is fit for purpose in your school. 4.2, the levels of engagement throughout lessons, throughout the school, pupil engagement. And where you've identified areas where engagement is in need of work or attention, how have you made change happen? How has your change process been inclusive? Was it pupil-led, staff-led, results-led? And how did you change it? How did you make your teaching and learning better in year 2 than in year 1? 4.3, the levels of technology across the school. Recent investments, training, apps, engagement with parents, and also bringing them on board as digital partners. How do you effectively use technology to support learning, both in the lessons and at home? How is ICT a fundamental part of teaching and learning in your school? 4.4, the deployment of your support staff. Have they a line manager in the school? Have they a forum, a place for which they can talk about their training, their CPD needs, and effectively that they're managed in a similar and fair fashion throughout the school? Also, is there levels of training and support for teachers about the best use of and management and deployment of support staff in the school? They're a valuable resource. We know that only all too well. So how do they get treated with full value, and how well are they deployed across the school? How well are their talents shared and utilised? 4.5, the planning system is in your school. The monitoring and evaluation of the effective planning and the impact of it that is having clear outcomes across groups in all lessons. So how do your teachers plan for their students? Short, medium, and long term, and the thought processes that have gone into it, and where staff have been able to own their own direction in the planning. 4.6, in your school, we're keen to see about the variety of approaches across the school and how the learning environment is enriched by having a number of strategies, a number of styles and pedagogies across the school, across the key stages, across curriculum areas. That word variety, that it's not total uniform and one size fits all. It's also a good chance to bring in the adaptations and the interventions that are in place across the school. 4.7, how do you utilize resources that support learning of groups and individuals as well as the whole class? So what resources have maybe you invested in, whether it's been small investment but has had a big impact, or it's been large investment because of a particular need that has arisen in your school? Which curriculum areas have received this investment, and what was the rationale behind it? 4.8, do you regularly audit the resources that enable your school to accurately reflect the needs of the pupils, and how do you review this? What spend is allocated for teachers and coordinators, and how do they then best spend this finite resource? 4.9, the digital technology in the school. Which resources and of recent note in recent times have made a genuine contribution to learner and to improving learners' engagement and their progress? I was in a school last week where they have, over the last 24 months, really looked at both digital literacy and digital numeracy, the development of apps across the school, with the bigger plan of creating genuinely a culture of belonging in both literacy and in numeracy. They wanted to reach out that all learners could feel a love for both core subject areas. And one of their target groups was indeed reluctant writers and reluctant mathematicians. So how could they instill a love for both curriculum areas through digital technology that would enable the learners in question to find a home within that curriculum area? They didn't want students to feel marginalized. They wanted to actually actively work upon children saying they disliked certain areas. They wanted to show a degree of outreach to these students as to how well they could find a way and a safe place for them to learn in that subject area. 4.10, how does the quality of all the learning environments reflect the inclusive ethos of your school? It's a great time there to do a learning walk and to reflect upon that. The display boards, the nurture nooks and crannies, the welcome signs, the visibility, to do the learning walk through the eyes of a child. And does it really reflect how inclusive you say you are, or where you want your school to go? And does it reflect the intake of pupils you have, their current and contemporary learning? And does it feel, or does it add to your school? Or has it gone stale? Is there room for improvement there? Or are there certain corridors that you may feel do it better currently than others, and you might like to address that in time? I think that's important when you're going through the IQM process, is that degree of honesty. I think when most schools look at our sub-criteria, they almost score themselves a de facto 7 out of 10, saying, yeah, we're doing most of that, but not all across the school at all times. That indeed actually is your area for growth, is just trying to get that consistency going. So I think that's worthy of note, that you can say that you're almost scoring yourself 7 out of 10, but you've accepted in the months and terms ahead there is room for improvement there. 4.11 specific. Staff are knowledgeable about the specific needs of their individual learners. How well do you know your children? How you gather the information in your children that empowers you and enables you as a team to deliver? How have you then used this information to better the provision in your school? So you've got specific learners, you'll outline their needs in the data capture at the start of this form. What actions have you taken to make sure they fully belong in the school? Perhaps it's how you've used Boxall profiles, and how you've used IEPs in the past, or how you've got mentoring programs, assertive mentoring. There's different degrees of infusing your students to learn, but it's how well you know them and the actions you've taken thereafter. 4.12, the positivity that children show during lessons. If we're in the classrooms, how do we know the children genuinely are the hardest working people in there and not the teachers? It's their environment, their home, their roles and responsibilities, their collaboration and their collegiality with their partners. And that in the lesson, there continues to be a buzz throughout. So how do you monitor that your children are making these positive contributions? And they enjoy every aspect of school life. Are there pupil voice questionnaires and surveys that reflect this, as well as leadership drop-ins and visits to classrooms to make sure this is happening right across the school, and in particular across year groups? 4.13, how the teaching staff demonstrate a range of different approaches. The kinesthetic, the audio, the visual learners, and that there's CPD available to teachers throughout, that they can address the fact that they need to develop a range of approaches. So how does the school set the stall out in terms of CPD at whole school level as well as individual level? And 4.14, how are your teachers reflective in their practice? And how do they get a chance to communicate with each other to improve the pedagogical skills? And how do you have the environment correct that allows for skilled coaches and leaders to give, and then for others to accept constructive criticism? So how do you manage that? And how do SLT reflect upon how they are having these difficult conversations? And then how did you get to a point where all staff want to be a part of these conversations and understand their need and their vital importance? Okay, just move towards the end of element 4 there. Are there any questions on element 4? Yes, there's questions came through here in email. I'm just reading it out now. Are learning styles and differentiation of interest to your assessor? Guys, if it's of interest to your school and your school have taken into consideration the different learning styles and where they've had to use either differentiation or adaptive approaches, and that has formed part of your reflection and your thinking process, yes, well, that'll be of interest to us. We're very keen to hear about your current story and your context, aware that leaders have difficult decisions to make, and sometimes they have to be pragmatic, and sometimes they may even have to show a degree of short-termism, or where they've been able to plan for long-term changes of pedagogy and whole school approaches that take time to settle and embed. We're very keen to hear about how teaching and learning is constructed and delivered in your school, and how inclusion drives that. Every school, whether it's primary, secondary, rural, urban, large or small, has got their own internal factors and external factors weighed upon them. So where you've made decisions and you're able to justify them, that's what we're very keen to hear. And our assessor will just be keen to hear how inclusion was included in the thinking behind the decisions that you have made as a leadership team. Okay, any other questions today? No, I would say that when it comes to looking at element 3 and 4, and I've said that from the outset here, there's a lot of material that schools have in both elements, and they're quite well padded, and our assessors get a very good pre-assessment picture from the school. I would also then say, guys, just moving on through that, just a few assessor tips before you finish. In your documentation, I've said there about making this as positive a process as is possible. Where you can identify inclusion champions across your school who are really leading strong practice, please do either initialize them or name them in your document. And if you don't want to name them, certainly let the people that are delivering it know that you're very appreciative and that when you looked at our national standards, that they were the people you began to think of as drivers of inclusion in school, real inclusion champions. Use this process as the opportunity to say well done and thank you to your staff. And where you identify strong performance, let them know and amplify that message. They're your inclusion champions. It's their practices and their mannerisms, their leadership behaviours that you want to ring fence, and you want to make explicitly told, that narrative told across your school. When our assessor visits your school, they'll certainly be very keen to learn of the ripple effect of the process. So you can almost take it as a given. If I'm talking now to the IQM leads in the school, the Senkos or the inclusion leads, you will be a key player when speaking to our assessor, but they'll be very much looking to establish beyond your office, beyond your shoulders, how are your team genuinely owning the inclusion agenda, and is the ripple effect of this team effort being felt and seen in all learners. Maybe if you are looking for a little bit of inspiration as well, you could look either on our website, and you will see some of the schools that have recently received the award, be it the Inclusive School Award, the Centres of Excellence for Flagship, and you can look and read through some of their case studies and their highlights of some of the initiatives that are going on in their setting that you may not have even thought about including, or you're thinking, you know what, that's exactly what we need to do to improve next year. So there's a lot of inspiration in terms of completing this form and school development just by looking through the case studies of some of these high performing schools. And indeed, you can follow us all on social media. Every Friday, we will have a Dexter Day, and our hashtag is IQM Family. So if you're on Twitter or you're following us on Twitter, there's the IQM Award, which is the company handle, as well as my own. We will be sharing and signposting schools to examples of strong inclusive practice already in the family around the country. And again, what they're doing should and could be of interest to yourselves going forward. Guys, with that, I'll draw this one to a close. I know at this time of year we're tired. We're moving towards the finish line. It is summer term, so I thank you all for taking the time to attend today, and I wish you all the very best for the remainder of term. There'll be 2 more webinar sessions. I'm sure some of you have signed up to it, and we look forward to seeing you all again. Thank you very much.